Welcome. That's the housekeeping. So thank you all for coming to our first Learning to Play and Playing to Learn conference at the Faculty of Education. It's a joint conference organised by the Real Centre and the Pedal Centre. So that's the Research for Equitable Access and Learning Centre and the Centre for Play in Education, Development and Learning. My name's Paul Ramchandani. I'm the Lego Professor of Play here at Cambridge University. Which many people tell me must be the best job in the world. and some days it is, and this is one of those days. It's been fantastic to build up to this conference, and it's fantastic to see you here today, and I'm immensely excited to hear the speakers that we've got lined up, and for the discussion that I hope will flow, and action that will hopefully flow from the day as well. We're delighted to welcome friends from around the world to share insights on the role of play-based learning in educational settings and early education, particularly in low resource and low income settings. There's a lot of really interesting challenges and interesting things to think about, and I hope we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that today. Very glad also to have colleagues here from the Lego Foundation today. Welcome. The Lego Foundation funds a lot of the work in the Pedal Centre, and so their support makes the work that we do, but also events like today possible. So I'm delighted they're able to join us for that. You'll be hearing from many wonderful speakers in the room, but we also have other details of other work that's done in the Real Centre and the Pedal Centre outside on posters. So in the breaks, if you get a chance, do have a look and quiz the people who are standing near posters who are doing the work. That gives us a chance to show you some of the other stuff that we do. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker, and I'm delighted to welcome Professor Charlotte Watts, CMG, who is Chief Scientific Advisor to the Department for International Development here in the UK. She's there on secondment from her role as Professor of Social and Mathematical Epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Charlotte's work's been instrumental in first documenting the extent that women around the world experience domestic violence, and then demonstrating that much of this violence is preventable, but her work obviously spans huge areas now. Charlotte was recently named as one of the 100 most influential people in gender policy for 2019 by Apolitical, which is a list that aims to shine a light on individuals whose work is considered indispensable to creating a fairer world for everyone. Quite an accolade. She's also a Fellow of the Academy of Medical Sciences, and I feel very privileged and honoured to welcome her to come and talk to us today. Thank you, Charlotte.
So good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. You know, Paul, your job does sound pretty damn good, but I think actually mine, as being Chief Scientist to the UK Department for International Development, is a close run second, because in my role I have the real pleasure of going and learning about the range of really exciting research that as a department we support. And all of that research is really seeking to generate evidence that we can use to make a difference to people's lives in the developing world. And an area that I feel very proud about is the work that we support in education, the work that we're pioneering along with others on early childhood development. And so it's a privilege to be invited here to open up this joint meeting run by Pedal and the Real Centres here at the University of Cambridge. Can I get my slides, please? Oh, sorry, is it me? Okay, sorry, my mistake. I'm the Chief Scientist, but I'm having a mistake. I'm making a mistake with the basic science here, sorry. So we know an estimated 43% of children under 5 years old in low and middle income countries are at risk of not achieving their development potential due to poverty and stunting. We also know that such disadvantage early in child's lives affects their health and well-being, their school performance, and a host of later life outcomes, which compound to keep them and their families locked in vicious cycles of poverty. So at DFID, we have a core mission, which is to end extreme poverty. Now, that is a very clear mission, but clearly a very ambitious and difficult mission. And for us, focusing on children and thinking about how do we improve the life trajectories of children is a critical part of that vision of how do we move towards eradicating extreme poverty. We need to change the circumstances in which children grow up, and we need to identify what are ways to improve their life chances. We want to make sure that children not only survive, but also thrive. We want them to succeed and prosper as adults in a rapidly changing world, and that our investments in people lead to greater equity as well as economic growth for the countries with whom we work. This is why DFID supports the Nurturing Care Framework, which was launched at the World Health Assembly last year. What I really like about this framework is that it's holistic in its nature. It recognises the importance of good health and nutrition, early learning opportunities, safety and security, and responsive caregiving. Important also are the enabling policies and services that support parents, caregivers, and communities to provide nurturing care for children. So we sometimes get asked, I get this asked actually quite a few times within DFID and in some of my external engagement, is why do we focus so much on the importance of investing in early childhood development interventions when countries are still not getting many other child-related services right? So things like vaccine coverage are still variable in many places, and infants still die from preventable diseases. Many children attend primary school but still can't read or count afterwards, and there aren't sufficient access for many of those who progress their education into secondary school. And I think these are all fair challenges, and I think these are challenges that when we're thinking about future opportunities, I hope that everybody reflects on. Any intervention in one sector has an opportunity cost of what we could be doing in another sector. So we always need to be thinking about what's the best way to use our resource, what's the very best intervention that can deliver maximum return. When you look at the opportunities around early childhood development and the opportunities of play, for us we think there is a really exciting potential, but we really need to understand better how do we optimize that potential and how do we understand what we achieve by investing in play and investing in early childhood. There is evidence, as you know, from economics and cognitive neuroscience about the importance of intervening early to promote ACD, which DFID is defining as running up to the age of 8. You are probably all aware of the Heckman curve, this curve here, which I mean, we can quibble a bit about the detail, but I think makes a strong case on the large returns on investing in a child's early years rather than later points in their life. Although the Heckman's work doesn't mention the importance of preconception and child development, so I don't think it's the perfect framework, but I think it does make that case of investment early is a good return. Similarly, there are neuroscientific data on the importance of children's early development in the first 1,000 days from conception, and even the first 2,000 days to the time that children are old enough to start school or preschool. So you can see from this work, these illustrations on brain development, that children's brains form important synapses during the first 2 years, and how this develops from newborn to a month to 9 months to 2 years on to adulthood. This shows how important that early intervention is. And conversely, the development deficits caused by poverty, how they can become established very early and are observable in the first year and even the first few months of lives. So for these reasons, among others, the importance of ECD as an outcome is highlighted in various places through Sustainable Development Goals, not least in Goal 2.2, to eliminate stunting, 3.2 to stop preventable child deaths, 16.2 to eliminate violence against children, and 4.2 to ensure that all girls and boys have access to quality early childhood development, care and pre-primary education. At DFID, we recognise that ECD defies the usual silos of health, education, nutrition, water and sanitation and social protection. We're talking about the same children, after all. So we are really looking for evidence on how to work better, both within and across sectors, to reach and support all children, and especially the most disadvantaged and marginalised children in societies. We want to ensure that they receive effective nurturing care for healthy growth and full development. Traditional models of child interventions often emphasise health approaches during children's initial years, things like pre- and postnatal practices, breastfeeding, and ensuring adequate nutrition before children reach pre-primary school at 4, 5 or 6. Our attention then often switches onto the role of education sector after this. But is this enough? We're interested in thinking across the life course. We want to identify how different approaches across sectors can complement one another for a maximum effect, recognising also that child development in the main happens in families and communities outside of the provision of formal services. We're also thinking into the long term about what kind of adults our partner countries want. All societies want adults who are healthy, socially responsible, economically productive and engaged citizens. Adults with emotional intelligence and transferable skills in empathy, leadership and conflict resolution will reduce the risk of violence in later life within families and within societies, and are also likely to be the core skills needed to support economic growth in the 21st century. So DFID is an evidence-generating and evidence-informed organisation, and we believe strongly in the need for evidence to inform everything that we do. DFID is relatively unique in the development world, as investing and committing 3% of our budget into research. And that's our commitment to take a rigorous, problem-focused approach across disciplines. We already invest in significant amounts in research in health, education, violence prevention and other sectors relevant to child development. But over the past few years, we've also been investing much more specifically in ECD research, because we want to learn how to deliver good quality nurturing care and early learning opportunities. We have, for example, through a research partnership with the World Bank's Early Learning Partnership, we are engaged in conducting at-scale research in 5 countries. So it's not only what can we do, but how do we deliver those interventions at scale. We also have an ECD programme run by the British Academy in partnership with the Global Challenges Research Fund. DFID also emphasises the importance of early experiences in its 2018 Get Children Learning Education sector policy. In addition, we have recently committed just over £20 million into a new cross-sectoral multidisciplinary research programme to help build the evidence base around early childhood and what works. In particular, looking at the questions raised by the 2016 Lancet series about how to effectively implement ECD interventions at scale, both within and between sectors. So moving on to the focus of this conference and ECD and play, when we think about play, there are a wide range of possible activities that come to mind, from children chasing each other around in the playground to sitting quietly with a toy by themselves, or playing games with parents and other family members. Indeed, there are different typologies used to understand and classify play, including this one developed here in Cambridge by David Whitbread and his team in this faculty. They divide play into 5 categories: physical play, play with objects, symbolic play, which can include music or drawing, pretend play, and games with rules. Different types of play are likely to offer wide benefits in terms of child welfare, health, and learning outcomes. The physical exercise of running around and skipping, the development of gross and fine motor skills, social skills from communications and negotiations, and benefits for wider learning being the focus of this conference. Children will play in different ways and at different ages. Different types of play might also offer benefits for different types and groupings of children: girls and boys, children with diverse and special needs, and children affected by violence, trauma, and conflict. Amongst the latter, play could provide a really important opportunity for children who grow up in a context of violence or in a violent household or in a fragile setting to escape from everyday stresses and to develop their resilience and social skills that will reduce the longer-term impacts of that trauma, but also reduce their likelihood of experiencing violence in adulthood. So when I think about the challenges of looking at play, there are 3 main challenges. The first of all, and I've already alluded to this, is that play cuts across different aspects of children's lives, and therefore multiple systems and sectors, not least health, education, and social protection. To engage with play effectively, we need to think beyond the confines of our disciplines, to place children at the centre, and identify how to tackle the complex barriers that impede children's development. What is powerful is that children will find ways to play as a matter of course, from playing football with a plastic bottle to chasing a wheel with a stick. So what we need to think about is whether and how we can enhance what they're doing and add value in a cost-effective way, whether through research to generate what more we can do, or through really piloting and trialling different types of interventions, whether in the home, the community, the playground, and the classroom. And what I'm excited about here is that we have people spanning all of those different sectors and areas, and I really hope that the conversations we'll be having, both in this formal environment, but also around coffee and lunch, will foster that exchange. Secondly, and an important focus given today's conference, is that we seek not only to just work across sectors and disciplines, but also across different contexts and cultures. Context is critical in thinking about early childhood and play. We need to understand how people think about play in different settings, how it interacts with different types of learning, and what factors shape the opportunities for boys and girls to play. And we know there are highly gendered aspects to play in many settings. Are the questions around play the same or different in diverse contexts? Are there different opportunities in environments where people are more collective and communal in their lives and lifestyles, putting family and community needs first compared to more individualistic settings? What can we do to support vulnerable families living in poverty, where children may have limited opportunities to play, where there may be many pressing pressures on their time that make play be seen as a luxury versus a necessity? Finally, and cross-cutting these, is the issue of measuring play, which comprises the focus of the second panel. As you might expect, for DFID, measurement is very important. We need to understand and get robust evidence of what works in implementing early childhood interventions at scale. Regarding the measurement of play, we would be interested to know more about the benefits of different forms of play and how to generate meaningful data that can inform policymakers, parents, teachers, and donors. Fortunately, we're in good company to tackle these challenges. Amongst donors, the World Bank has appointed a global lead for early years to promote ECD across all of its sectors. And since 2012, the bank has more than doubled its investment in early childhood development from $2 billion to over $4.5 billion. UNICEF has long been a sector lead in promoting ECD and is developing a global metric to measure progress against SDG 4.2. While the World Health Organization has been leading international institutions to develop and convene around the nurturing care framework that I mentioned earlier. Not to mention the scores of civil society and voluntary sector organizations who are working in this sector to improve outcomes for children. And I really do see these sectors as being the important innovators who give us and shine a light on new innovations and new ways of working that we need to be thinking about how do we learn from and translate into scale. Researchers have also been doing important work to address some of the most pressing questions around ECD and play in low-income countries. For example, as part of our British Academy-funded programme, a study by UCL in Uganda highlighted, amongst other findings, the gendered nature of parents' play with children. Mothers were more likely to engage in interactive play than fathers, and there was limited appreciation of the social, cognitive, or other benefits of play. Many parents were not aware of how they can change and improve their child's intelligence through play and stimulation, although we're very committed supporting children to go to school. We need to address those gaps in information for parents. And here in Cambridge, this conference represents an exciting and cutting-edge collaboration between the two hosts, the Real Centre and the Pedal Centre. The Real Centre researches educational access and learning in low and low-income countries, and his work has shown that learning gaps between the poorer and richer students start early, and so need to be tackled even before children start school. These findings from the Centre directly influence DFID's 2018 education strategy and our commitment to an evidence-based approach to supporting early childhood development education, which currently comprises less than 1% of donor education budgets. The Pedal Centre, on the other hand, examines the role of play in children's learning and development, the role of play in low-resource settings in contested, but the Pedal Centre and the LEGO-funded researcher, Dr. Ezenam Arononyo, studied parent and teacher views of the role of play in children's education in schools in Ghana and are providing, I think, important insights into how important it is. Dr. Jenny Gibson has also researched the utility of different approaches to measuring and studying play, including the use of GPS methods for tracking children's movements in the playground. I would love to see the data on that, by the way. And we'll be hearing more about that work throughout the day. So, in conclusion, to wrap up, I really look forward to hearing and learning from the discussions today. I have to leave shortly after this session, I'm afraid, but a number of different staff are here, and we'll be kind of getting feedback from them about what are the implications for us moving forward. I would encourage you all to think outside your own sector, to really take advantage of the opportunities to network with people you haven't met before, the people that you haven't spoken to before. And then to think about how do we work either as a researcher or as a practitioner to focus on the whole child and to think about how we can effectively come together as a professional community to support children most effectively. I've got a couple more slides, sorry. And I'm going back to the issue of context, because I think in this research, it's really important that we ground what we're trying to achieve in the context of children's realities. So firstly, to think about how do we prioritize and think about interventions in countries where there's conflict. So this map shows the extent to which children are living in conflict. And those darker countries with the darker shaded countries are countries where more than 60% of children are exposed to conflict. The other context that I want to highlight, and that's coming from my own professional background, is the extent to which children are living in households where there's violence. So we know globally 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence. There is variation around the world, but everywhere it's a common reality. And there's still a tendency in our silos to think about it as being a rare event versus a common event. We also know that corporal punishment is still widespread in many households and in many schools. If we look at levels of ongoing violence, in some settings the violence is higher. So this is a map from demographic and health surveys that show the prevalence of women's experience of physical or sexual violence in the past year. And so the darker areas are more than 60%. So when we're thinking about households, when we're thinking about children, when we're thinking about play, we need to think about the opportunities of play, of early childhood development, to complement and support children who might be in situations where there is a lot of stress, where actually the behaviours that they're seeing modelled out aren't reflecting what we would hope children to grow up and aspire for in the future. And lastly, I want to give you a finding from another research programme that we've supported. And this is one from a large research programme that's called What Works, which has supported rigorous evaluations of 15 different types of interventions to prevent intimate partner violence. And this is a slide that summarises the findings from a rigorous evaluation of the Right to Play programme in Pakistan. And that was a play-based intervention implemented in schools, but run by quite an inspiring NGO. And it used a range of play activities to both challenge gender stereotypes about what kind of play girls do versus boys do, but also just to support interaction between the sexes. And what the evaluation showed is that over time, there were reductions in corporal punishment in the school and at home. There was also improved gender attitudes, as well as reductions in both the perpetration of violence by children and also levels of victimization of violence. I think what this shows is that carefully conceptualized and well-implemented interventions can really make a difference over programmatic lifetimes, and that's what we need to be striving to do. So I'll end with that positive note that interventions make a difference. I think we all believe that, but having that evidence is also very powerful. I really hope that you'll enjoy today's sessions. I hope you'll all learn, and you'll return to your workplaces inspired to really take the findings and the networks that you built up today to make a difference to children and to support parents, caregivers and communities to make nurturing care a reality for the millions of children around the world who are not currently reaching their full potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much for so clearly setting the scene for the importance of early child development and the international context and the challenge, I think, for us to ask difficult questions and think about opportunity costs when we're thinking about these issues. Now we're going to move straight on to our second speaker. And if there's time, we'll have questions before the coffee break, but if not, we'll have, you can queue up and ask both Professor Watts and Dr. Mariam questions at the coffee break. So our next speaker is Dr. Erum Mariam, and I'm delighted to welcome you back to Cambridge. Erum is the Executive Director of BRAC, Institute of Educational Development at BRAC University in Bangladesh. She completed her PhD in education here in the faculty, so we're very proud and honoured and delighted to have her back. And she's been part of the BRAC family since 1992. During this period, she has successfully led efforts towards bringing innovations in education outside of the public school system in both urban and rural areas in Bangladesh. And currently, and you may have seen some of this work in the press in recent months, her focus has been in scaling up play-based early childhood education and mental health services as part of BRAC's humanitarian effort with the displaced Rohingya communities in Bangladesh. She's the focal person for child protection and mental health in BRAC's humanitarian operations for the Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar, and I'm delighted she's going to share some of her work with us. Thank you, Erum.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's really an honor to be here. I remember the last time I was here was in 2008, and it was in a room like this that I was sort of defending my research, and I was biting my nails. And I thought, well, 11 years have passed, and I'm still biting my nails for this event. So what I will tell you today is the story of the humanitarian play labs. And the humanitarian play labs are an intervention that we did for the Rohingya children in Cox's Bazar. And we designed this intervention for the Rohingya children in Cox's Bazar. So, you might have heard that in 2017, 1 million Rohingya refugees came to Bangladesh. And out of the 1 million, 55% were children from 0 to 18. Now, if you compare it with the Bangladeshi context where the Rohingya refugees came, the refugees came to 2 sub-districts of Cox's Bazar. Just notice how close Rakhine State is with Cox's Bazar. So the refugees came to 2 sub-districts of Cox's Bazar, and the whole population of Cox's Bazar is around 2.2 million. Out of that, 13% are aged 0 to 5. Now compare it with the number of people who came from Rakhine. It's 1 million with 55%, and specifically 27% who are aged between 0 to 6. Now, we know that there are about 6 entry points to Bangladesh from Myanmar. And many of those are on land, but many are through the waterways. And, you might ask that, why did Bangladesh respond this way to the Rohingya refugees? Well, the answer is, first of all, it was the right thing to do. And the second reason is that those of you who know the history of Bangladesh, that, in 1971, we went through genocide. And I think that, when we heard about the pain of the people, of the Rohingya people, when we heard of the trauma and we heard of the oppression, it really resonated with us. And particularly with the generation like us, because with my generation who are before 1971, we remember the days when we had to hide because, there would be sort of, the army of the opposition, the Pakistan army would come and kill us. Now, it is a different situation, but just to demonstrate, just to say that we could understand the pain and there was an emotional connection with the Rohingya. You know, in 2017, in September, we were there, you know, right from August 25th to, you know, till now. But in September, mid-September, I was there with my colleagues. And in the roads in Cox's Bazar, all we saw were women with children and with infants and toddlers. There were no men. At that stage, the men sent the women because they thought that the women and children were at higher risk. And, you know, the men came on much later. So, you know, when the Rohingya refugees came in, just to give a little bit of context here, when they came in, then the initial shelters looked like this, which is very, very basic. But you know, now the shelters have improved. They have improved a lot. And, you know, I have to say that the Rohingya themselves are skilled craftspeople. And they, along with the UN and the NGOs and the government of Bangladesh, they have managed it really well. And the shelters have improved considerably. But, you know, it is not adequate, obviously, for, you know, refugee, for people to be, you know, in small rooms, a family of 6, a family of 14, family of 20, to be in shelters like this. It is not adequate. BRAC became the focal point. BRAC became a member of the child protection sector. And what that meant was that as a member of the child protection sector, we had to implement child-friendly spaces. And, you know, that had other implication also for us because, you know, we did early childhood development, we do play, we do learning through play. And when we took on this role, it meant that, you know, we were looking at the child-friendly spaces from the lens of play and learning. So, you know, we were running child-friendly spaces like this, and when we did that, you know, we were looking at the number of children who came in who are separated from families, the number of children who are not accompanied by an adult, you know, what are the issues related to trafficking, and what were the, you know, mental health and distress among the children and the families. But what we were also asking, because we do play, we were also asking is, what is Rohingya play? You know, we did play-based curriculum and play-based model along with the Lego Foundation in Bangladesh, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we looked at different settings, and we found out the play of Bangladesh, Uganda, and Tanzania. But that was not Rohingya play. So that is what we did. For the months and weeks that followed, we just researched on Rohingya play. And what we found was, you know, the Rohingya, they have rich culture. And one day we were in the camp and, you know, we were in the child-friendly space. At that time, the Humanitarian Play Lab was just, you know, starting. And, you know, the Humanitarian Play Lab was, we were looking at the Humanitarian Play Lab inside the child-friendly space that we were operating. And we found that one day that children were chanting rhymes. And when the children were chanting rhymes, the community, the parents, the grandparents, siblings, they were all outside that child-friendly space. And they were looking, and they were, you know, it seemed that they were so connected. And because the chanting that was taking place inside that center, that was uplifting. So with the rhymes, the kabya, we identified that this is something that the Rohingya children do. They love chanting, and these are all based on Myanmar national language. And when they do the chants, then there is also movement. Because, you know, there is we have not found that the Rohingya children sing, but we found that with the chanting, they move a lot. And there are also group dynamics because, you know, sometimes it's a younger child who starts the chanting, but everybody else follows. Then there were kissas and stories based on folk, you know, passed through generations. And, you know, we have been collecting those. Those children love very much, and these are very, very interesting and exciting stories. And then there's, of course, physical play. And this physical play that we collected, this is the trajectory of physical play that we've collected, and we found that, you know, this physical play is based on coordination and balance and precision and a lot of, integrates a lot of acrobats as well. So these are absolutely fascinating. We have not found it in anywhere else, the kind of physical play that the Rohingya children do. So this is a chanting that is going on, and this is the kind of physical play. So what we did is pretty much in October, a schedule and a routine was developed. And the routine was based on, a little bit of morning time, and then, Kavya, the rhyme session, then there's physical play, there's free play, and then there's a goodbye time. But I have to say that those working in the sector, in the child protection sector, and those who were implementing other child-friendly spaces, their schedules and their model looked different because they were only looking at it from child protection. And because we worked on play, we were looking at it from the lens of play and lens of learning. So, so the routine that we did, we added stories and we added art later on, but that was what it looked like in October 2017. We understood that trauma and distress will be there, of course. And, we have had consultations with children, with families, with women, and there were many, many horrific stories. And so what we did is we integrated psychosocial support in the model, and we trained frontline people, and we developed referral systems, because that is such an important part of the model. And so, we trained someone. This is a person in the black hijab, is from the host, and she's a para-counselor. She's a frontliner who's trained in providing psychosocial support. And, she also, there's a referral pathway that, there are trained psychologists, there are trained counseling psychologists, who will take cases from her. So we wanted all children to have access to this. So discovery of art. I mean, we found out that this was a group who love art. The children, the women, the siblings, they all love art. And there were certain motives. The choice of colors was different. And that became another very important part of the model. We were also consistently thinking about how the children can get a sense of pride, how the children can feel belongingness. And, we identified that play, the therapeutic effect of play. And, we, along with colleagues at the Tavistock, and we also invited colleagues from Julie Stone from Australia, Hisako from Japan, and Trudy and Bidi from Tavistock. And we were all looking at play as a tool for healing and coping framework. And what we found is that the way we had been working was that there is empathetic listening. We have to listen to children, respecting children, and preserving their culture. And in order to preserve their culture, that meant that we asked the community, we asked the mothers, we asked the women, we asked the men, what did your traditional houses look like in Rakhine? How can the children feel very, very comfortable inside the humanitarian play lab that we were creating? The children loved art, as I said, and they were creating their own spaces. And that is the interior, which was very important for the children to have. So all the humanitarian play labs that we have, these are, the ceiling is, you will find that the ceiling is covered by something like this, which is called a shamiana, which is stitched and designed by the women of the community. So every space that we got had a reflection of Rohingya culture. The people who were at the forefront, the facilitators, they were Rohingya women. And that was very, very important because the children have to see role models from their own communities. And the play leaders, they were playing with the children. And, I have to say that initially, there was, we found some of them to be a bit reserved, but, after a few weeks, they were engaging with the children like children. And so that's the story of the Humanitarian Play Lab. It emerged as a model within the child-friendly space that we were operating. And then came the Humanitarian Play project initiated by Lego Foundation, and we were very, very happy that we could be a partner in this with Sesame, with IRC, and with NYU. And thanks again to the Lego Foundation for coming up with this very, very exciting project, which is going to be from 20 till 2025, which is a 5-year project. I already said that 27% of the Rohingya are 0 to 6 years old. And the reach that we have now is 22.5%, but it will increase. So you might ask, what are the core features of this Humanitarian Play Lab then? Okay, so one of the core features is that it is an interdisciplinary model. I mean, you know, we have, it's about child protection, it's about psychosocial, it's about integrating psychosocial support with playfulness, it's about culture preservation, it's about participatory approaches, and it's very much about community and parent engagement. But what it's also about is developing the workforce. And we developed the workforce with training which was structured and simple. And everybody who was at the forefront, the play leaders, the supervisors, the para-counselors, they all go through training, which is basic training, but also ongoing training, ongoing refresher training every month. That is a very important part of the whole capacity building program. And the model itself is about 2 play leaders, and it's about 40 children per shift, and there are 2 shifts, and each of the centers is supervised by a supervisor from the host community, and also has counseling support, psychosocial support by a trained para-counselor. I've also talked a lot about the indigenous culture, but I just want to say that when we asked the children and the community, they said that this Humanitarian Play Lab is Kalipionara. Kalipionara, which means happy play space. And happy, in this publication, we have published all the rhymes and the game on the physical play and the art that we have collected. So, if at any time, you can go through this here. Curriculum. Now, I said that, we were basically, we had a reference. That is the Play Lab model. In the Play Lab model, we developed the curriculum for Bangladesh, for Uganda, and Tanzania. Here, when we were developing the curriculum, we again looked at those child development outcomes, the skills, physical, motor development, language development, socio-emotional development, cognitive development, resilience. But then what we also did is we looked at the early learning development standards for Bangladesh. We aligned it with the early learning development standards for Bangladesh, and we have aligned it with the education sector. Charlotte mentioned about the different sectors. We work in different sectors in the humanitarian setting. After the children do the humanitarian play labs, after that, they transition to the education learning centers. So that was also a very important thing that we had to bear in mind. And with the curriculum, the group that worked on the Play Lab curriculum, which was led by Dr. Cassie Landis from Columbia University, and we also had others in our team. They are the ones who have been working on the curriculum design and framework for the humanitarian Play Labs. And this also has integrated issues from child protection and, like I said, psychosocial and, looking at play as a tool for learning, but also play as a tool for healing and coping. Host community. I mean, If you worked in humanitarian setting and displaced communities, you know that initially the host is very, very excited, very, very enthusiastic, very supportive, but then that does not stay that way. And that has happened in Bangladesh as well. The host, I mean, you know, there were frustrations with the host, and the host, particularly those who are unemployed, there seemed to be some kind of tension. They, you know, they do not fully support the support of Bangladesh. And so what the government did is government made a policy that there has to be this amount of resources also coming for the host. But what we have done is, as a policy, we also employ people from the host, because the beauty of it is that the Rohingya and the host, we speak a similar dialect. So we come together in our dialect. Here I have been using you know, terms and you know, these are the themes that we work on. Of course, this is all under the Learning Through Play framework, but you know, we have been working on play as a tool for also healing and coping. We've worked a lot on participatory approaches. Like I said, we have to discover Rohingya play. Culture preservation is a very important part. Cultural identity, this is a model that has, you know, this is locally generated. It is about an Asian conceptualization of play-based ECD, and social cohesion and child protection. Child protection is where we are, where we sit. But we do have linkages with other sectors: health, mental health, and education. This is very important. In the Play Lab project, we had developed many, many tools. Thank you, Dr. David Whitebread. You have helped us to develop many of the tools that you see here today. But what we did is, these tools that we had developed for Bangladesh, Uganda, and Tanzania, we took it to the Rohingya setting, and we validated it for the Rohingya setting. But we also found out that, you know, along with playfulness and along with the tools that we developed to measure the impact of play and learning, we also had to develop and test other measures which look at the mental health status of caregivers and children. And, you know, this is a list. We have validated all these tools, but this is not an exhaustive list. We are still in conversation with David and others about how to also look at play as a tool for impacting healing and coping, and looking at the therapeutic effect of play. So you'll see a video now. at the end, to wrap up, I would say that there are two points that is important that we have found. One is from the point of view of people like us who work in the humanitarian setting, the people who provide services. The realization is that when we go into humanitarian settings, we should not look at deficits. We should look at the richness, and we should look at the strength of the people. It is with the strength and the richness that we created this model. And the second is when we go into humanitarian setting, and there are all these issues of displacement, and we work with people who have lost everything. But interventions like this, it gives people hope.